President Trump says the United States is now in a, quote, armed conflict with drug cartels and is declaring them to be unlawful combatants. This comes after the U.S. conducted several deadly strikes on boats allegedly trafficking drugs.
The memo, which was sent to the National Security Congressional Committees and obtained by The Hill, says, quote, the president directed the Department of War to conduct operations against them pursuant to the law of armed conflict. The United States has now reached a critical point where we must use force in self-defense and defense of others against the ongoing attacks by these designated terrorist organizations. Trump addressed U.S. military leaders in Quantico, Virginia earlier this week. Here's some of what he had to say about cartels.
We have to put the traffickers and cartels on notice, and we've done that. And we've put them, a lot of them, we've called them a terrorist organization, which is actually a big thing to do. Nobody's done it, but I've done it with a lot of them. It gives you a tremendous advantage. If you try to poison our people, we will blow you out of existence, because that's the only language they really understand. That's why you don't see any more boats on the ocean. You don't see any boats. Around Venezuela, there's nothing.
But questions are being raised about the legality of this move by the Trump administration. Members of Congress have said that Trump does not have the authority to use the military to target the cartels. Rhode Island Senator and member of the Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, says, quote, every American should be alarmed that President Trump has decided he can wage secret wars against anyone he labels an enemy. Drug cartels must be stopped, but declaring war and ordering lethal military force without Congress or public knowledge nor legal justification is unacceptable.
All right, Lindsay, what do you think about this? I'll let you go first.
So I think my biggest issue, of course, we need to combat all the drugs coming in this country and also make it a point to do so. But I think those are usually called counter-narcotics missions. And we saw when Trump had made a decision in the past, he said he's labeling this as terrorism. And so now these are called counterterrorism missions. And I think what's missing from this is that with drug cartels, they're criminal organizations and have been labeled that through past presidents for decades. And, you know, they're not like political or ideological actors like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And so I think that when we're trying to conflate everything just to justify military action, that's when we're abusing power. Now, while they should be combated and while we should certainly have these counter-narcotics missions continue, I don't think we should relabel them in order to give Trump the authority to make decisions that generally Congress would make.
So I think one of the big reasons, or two big reasons, why they were rightfully classified as terrorist organizations is that, one, especially in Venezuela, the cartels pay off the government so that they are able to operate freely. And they also routinely commit executions, including of political figures and people who oppose them, in order to create terror so that people do not oppose their ability to run drugs, smuggle humans, etc. So the way that they operate in terms of silencing dissent, paying people off through bribes, to me is very much politically motivated because they want the government in their pocket. And they also execute these types of terror campaigns around the border as well, forcing people to pay for safe passage, forcing people to smuggle drugs or humans if they want the ability to cross into the United States. Now, in terms of the strikes happening in mostly the Caribbean, to me, I view it sort of like combating pirates, right? It's an extrajudicial group. It's technically not a country, although they seemingly have the government in their pocket. But it would be, to me, the same as the Coast Guard going after a Somali pirate. I think that's the closest analogy that we could give to what the cartels are doing when they're running drugs up through the ocean. So I personally don't have any problem with the way that Trump has been approaching this, and I think it's high time that we take it seriously. Obviously, with the massive amount of increase in drug trafficking into the United States on the supply side over the past 10 years, whatever we were doing in terms of these counter-narcotic missions was not enough.
Well, I think the biggest concern for most critics is that we're expanding presidential war powers. And so we can still get things accomplished by, like you said, maybe it wasn't working, but now we have a Republican-led Congress in both the House and the Senate. So then get it done. Talk to your constituents and tell them and see what the American people want to do. Because also, this is supposed to be the America First president. And from what we've understood, from attacking boats in the Caribbean to going to war with Iran that people were dissatisfied with for 12 days, and engaging in conflict, to some declaring the department as not the Department of Defense, but now the Department of War, and now expanding your executive privilege by relabeling something from narcotics to terrorism. These are all 4 examples of it seemingly going in the wrong direction. We want more conversation around how to bring America at the forefront and not to be engaged in foreign conflicts. And so that should be a conversation amongst the people that represent Americans in Congress to figure out how the best way to proceed is, especially since the drugs you're talking about are infiltrating communities around the country. And so we don't just want decisions being made willy-nilly by our president, but rather decisions being made by Congress as they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obviously America first to say that we should have some kind of action against boats that are coming up to America to poison our people with drugs. And I would challenge any Democrat who opposes this.
Well, I think we could try the people, right? We could arrest the people. We just killed them. That, to me, it could constitute, depending on how you label it, as way too aggressive of an action, depending on what the proof and information that we have. And then if there were any civilians on that boat, now we're going too far. So that's what I mean. We have Congress to help decide and make firm decisions like this when we're talking about narcotics missions. And I think that that's where we risk extending presidential power too far, because we have to make sure that we're counteracting actual drugs coming into our country and not just President Trump thinks that might be a boat with narcotics on it. And, say that one person was a civilian, then what? Now we're engaging another country by killing their civilians.
Well, I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able to see whatever intel they have that has led them to believe that this boat is filled with cartel members smuggling drugs. We are not going to be able to see confidential sources and methods that led to that assessment, just as we wouldn't in really any decision to take military action. And I do find it interesting, when in his first term, Trump executed the strike on Qasem Soleimani. There was no hand-wringing about, well, Congress didn't know about this and Congress didn't approve this. Everyone actually celebrated. But now when we go after cartel boats that are bringing thousands of pounds of fentanyl or cocaine to the United States, it's like, oh, well, his presidential power has gone too far.
Well, I think it's a series of events that I mentioned. I think the relabeling, to use it, he's calling everyone involved with this terrorist. And
they
just
are.
use, but and mind you, that you could feel that way, but terrorists are actually usually associated with this ideological thing that's like ISIS or Al Qaeda and how they're operating. And I know you're saying
Well,
that
not
they're
necessarily. I mean, so terrorism can have ideological motivations, but really, I think the primary definition is that they use violence in order to affect political ends. And in this case, the cartels absolutely do that because, again, they are deliberately executing people, paying off governments so that they have the political ability, right, the approval of politicians in order to behave in a certain way.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I'm not saying let's not counter drugs coming into this country. I'm just saying with Soleimani, we're talking about a totally different instance versus right now, we're talking about something that for decades has been labeled as narcotics and has been handled in that way as drug criminals, drug rings, and we handle those specifically in a certain way. And even though that way is not adequate because we haven't captured and stopped enough drugs coming in this country, perhaps that's when you come together with the leaders of this country, not just President Trump, because we don't live in a dictatorship, to talk about what the strategy forward is. And if we really would like to label these people as terrorists, have a conversation with the highest people in the land, and not just President Trump, which is what makes us different in America, a democracy, that President Trump shouldn't just decide things, especially on the heels of calling something the Department of War, but telling us you don't want to engage in many wars on the heels of attacking Iran and saying you don't want to engage in international conflict. It's just confusing to the average American that's watching all this play out within weeks of one another and feeling unsettled. And that's something that should be addressed because, again, we're not a dictatorship. He has to answer to the people that got him in office.
I would challenge any Democrat who thinks this is a bad idea to talk to a mother in Ohio who lost her son to a drug overdose and see what her reaction is, because my guess is this will be broadly popular with the American people. Coming up, the Trump administration has made an offer to universities when it comes to funding. Some Democrats are not happy about it. Stay with us.